So now that we have a login bar, we can click login and we see the login screen. We can click sign up, we see the sign up screen. We can click home, we see the fake Slack screen. And so we have different components. Each component is rendered depending on the route we're on, which is cool. This is fun to do. It's a fun game to play. But the next thing we're going to do is we're going to kick it up a notch and allow users to log in to our application. To allow users to log in to our application, which whatever real application does, we're going to need to use Firebase again. And so if you remember from our last project yesterday, we had a folder called services that had a file in it called firebase.js. Everyone remember that? So go into your source folder and make a new folder called services. And inside there, make a new file called firebase.js. Right in here. And I want you to copy everything from your old Firebase file. So remember, import Firebase from Firebase/app, import Firebase auth, import Firebase/Firestore, all of your configuration. Make sure you initialize it, export the DB, export auth, and the database is the Firestore database, which we just call DB, and then export Firebase. So copy all of that and put it inside your new Firebase.js file and save it. And then I want you to go to your app.js and I want you to import it at the very top. Oops, wrong one. That's my old thing. So in your app.js, go to the very top and let's import db auth from ./services/Firebase. Cool. We're also going to need to turn this app function into a class. So I want you to instead say class app extends react.component, render the component, and return all of this JSX. And then delete the old app, or just comment it out or whatever you want to do. So it's the same thing, right? Except now we're using a class. Can anyone remind me why we want to use classes instead of functions sometimes? To use state. We want to have state in our app. And remember that props is data in a component that does not change, and state is data in a component that does change. And that's really the biggest difference, is that props is data you know is not going to change, and so you just pass it to a component and it figures out how to display HTML based on that component. State is data component that can change at any time. So an example of state is whether or not the user is logged in, right? So we can say state is equal to, and we're going to put the user in here and set them equal to null, which means early on, when our app starts out, it should be null, right? Now this is important because if the user is null, there's certain things we want to display. Like we want to say, hey, log in or sign up if the user is null. Otherwise, we probably want to display like a profile component, right? Something like that. And so we can actually tell if the user is logged in, display some information. If they're not logged in, don't display anything. We also want a way for them to click the login button or sign up button to be able to log in or sign them up. Now there's a bunch of ways to do login and sign up, but I'm going to show you the easiest one with Firebase first. And you can play around with the other one later. Cool? So if you go to Firebase here, you'll see that in our Firebase project, we were playing around with the database last course. we looked at, we made like a recipe app and we made a students app, right? Now, if you see that button up there that says authentication, you see that authentication button up there, the top left? Click that authentication button and it'll tell you, hey, we want to set up a sign-in method. Cool, I want to set up a sign-in method. Click that button that says set up sign-in method. Now here's all the ways that Firebase will let you sign in. With email and password, with your phone, with Google, with games. If you want to build a game, games in Game Center, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, Yahoo, Microsoft, or just as an anonymous user. Maybe you want to allow like anonymous people to comment on your app or something. I don't, so I'm going to use this one right here called Google. And I'm just going to click this button right here.
Should we just use the Firebase we used yesterday?
Yeah, I'm just using the same project I used yesterday.
So you want to enable?
And you're going to click Enable. That's right. Now when...
How at 4.6K reads.
I don't know how that is either, but I would maybe be worried about that.
How much is the limit?
I'm going to select my email. What do you mean?
What's the limit for reads?
The limit for reads, I think it's like 50,000, something like that. So you should be okay for now.
Wait, I have a question. Doesn't it
Yeah.
warn you before?
It does not, but if you don't have a credit card registered, it'll just shut down your services until you pay for it if you were to go over that limit. So as long as you don't have a credit card registered, you're fine.
I can just... Isn't that really not too long?
Well, if you have a credit card, you can set it up to where it just won't charge you. If it goes over that, it'll just shut down your services. Depends on what you want to do. Now, once you save this right here, you should then have Google enabled on your app. And you should see that right there. It says Google enabled. Now, the other thing we're going to have to do is add an authorized domain here, but we're going to do that in a second. Now, I always do this whenever I want to log a user in with Google. I go to the documentation. So, like, if you go to the documentation here, there are so many great things about the documentation. They just explain things really well. There's all different kinds of nice code snippets on how to use stuff. But if you want to do authentication, you just click that authentication button, and you can see they have all the different ways you can authenticate users, right? If you go to the web one, there's one for Google Sign-In, and it'll tell you exactly how to sign users in. How to authenticate using Google Sign-In with JavaScript. So it'll tell you all this stuff. You need to create an instance of the Google provider object. So var provider equals all this stuff like this, right? It'll tell you to add the scope, all this other stuff. Really what you want to do is ours is going to look like something like this. Or actually, let's do the pop-up one. Sign in with pop-up. This is what ours is going to look like right here. Whenever we click this button, we're going to get, or click a button, it's going to get our authentication. It's going to sign in the user with a pop-up, get the results, and we're going to store the user in our application. Cool? So you're going to need all of this code, and you're also going to need this code right here. So I'm going to take that code, and I am going to go back into my app, and I'm going to create a function here, or a class method called sign in user. Now when I sign that user in, when they click a button to sign in the user, I want them to first create this provider. Oh, we should probably import Firebase too up here. And I'm going to call this a constant. So whenever we run this sign in user method, it's going to create a Google OAuth provider, which is going to allow them to sign in with Google. And then the next thing we need to do is run this function they give us right here. Now the only difference...
Should we have more sign-up functions inside the class?
Honestly, you don't have to have them inside the class. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. I'm going to show you one way, and I'm going to show you an easier way after. You're going to get some bugs with this no matter what. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Honestly, like this right here is really all you need for the time being. If you use most of their function, you don't necessarily need. But the part you do need is to say Firebase auth.signin with pop-up provider. But we already got the auth, so you can just say auth.signin with pop-up and then pass in the provider we just created. And then take the result and get the user from that result. And then just console.log that user to see what's wrong. Now all this error handling, that's fine too, but let's just console.log the error if something goes wrong. And this is really all your function needs to do. It needs to sign in the user. If it works, get the user. I'm going to call this a constant 2. If it doesn't work, console.login will figure out why it went wrong. Is that cool? Now we want to run this function whenever someone logs in or signs up or whatever. So we probably don't actually need 2 different components here. We probably just need like a login component. We don't even need a sign up component. However, when the user logs in, we want them to run the sign in user function. So here's what we do. You ready? Here where it says component login, what we can do instead is we can pass, and by the way, you can find all this right here. They'll explain all of the React router stuff to you. If you go to the web one, they'll explain how to do routing, which is exactly what we did, like a home page, an about page, a users page, all this stuff right here. And then it'll also explain like, hey, you have a home page, an about page, how to do it, how to do nested routing. Maybe you want to route inside your routing, or maybe you want to pass, I think the one we want is to pass data to your component. Let's see where it is. Preventing transitions, no. Query parameters, I think? Maybe. No, I don't think that's the one we want. That's fine. There's one here I saw earlier. I could have sworn I saw it, but it is what it is. Basically what you want to do is you want to return a component like this. I think this is how you do it, where we pass it some props. The props we want to pass the login component is this function right here, sign in user. So we'll just say sign in is equal to this.sign in user. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want this login component to run this sign in user function as soon as we click on a button. So what we're telling it is, hey, whenever I click that login component, I want you to sign in the user. Let's just make sure this doesn't break. Hopefully I didn't break it. Okay, that still works. Okay, that still works. Cool. I feel good about this. Oh, you know what? I think you have to do it like this. Because we're export default Firebase, and then we're exporting DB and auth. So excuse me, I apologize. I'm pretty sure, because I saw the error pop up down there, I'm pretty sure you have to import it like this. But now we're ready to sign in our user. We're going to get one error, and then we're going to fix it, and then we're going to be able to log in users with Google, which is really cool. That's really all we need to do. And so we're going to come down here to our login component, and we're going to create a function, or a button, that when we click on that button, let's just call this, let's just say Google here, log in with Google or whatever. And when we click it, we want it to run the props.signin function and make sure this has props. And so if you do that, you should now be able to see the login button should have a sign in with Google thing right there. If you don't have it, it's okay. If you do have it, you're good to go. We're going to get one error, we're going to fix it, and then we're going to be able to sign our users into our application, which is kind of nice. Yes, question?
Can we go back to the part where we like the path login component equals function?
This right here?
Yeah.
What this is this is a function that returns the login component. The reason why we're doing that is so we can pass in this sign in user function as a property. So props.signin is going to be the this.signin user method that we created right here. So we're taking this and we're passing it in to the login component right there. That's why we do this. Because if you do it like that, we're just saying, hey, the component is this home component. Whereas if we do it like this, we're saying, hey, I want this component to be a function that returns the login component so that we can give it some props, some information. And this will work fine. If you don't have, like if you can't click around to these things and see all of that goodness happen, then there might be an error, and we can come fix it in a second. Cool. Now, once you have this set up, if you pop this into a new screen like this, and you look at the console, you should be able to click the login with Google button and see an error down there. See what it says? What does it say? Auth, unauthorized domain. This domain, blah, 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 is not authorized. So copy that domain right there. All you need to do is copy this and then put it into your Firebase project. Like so. Down here you say add domain, add that domain, and then run your app, and you should now be able to log your users in with Google. So click it again. Oh, still got an error. Refresh. There we go. Sign in with Google. I sign in with Google. Amazing. And I see all of my Google information. I'm now signed into this app with Google. So it has my display name, my email. It even has a photo ID that I can use. So maybe as soon as I log in, I want to get the user information, and I can display my photo ID now. I will show you the photo in a second, actually. But if the more important thing is if I go here and I go to users, I should now see that I am now signed into this application, and it saves me and my user ID, so I can use my information wherever I want in the app. And that is sign in with Google in like 20 minutes. So we'll come fix your bugs and errors, but right now, if you can get a user signed in, I want to see if you can take that user's information right here, because you get the user, we're console.logging it. See if you can add the right user information to your state and then make the user's photo appear right here. If you can do that, you're good to go. Cool?
Can you Slack your code?
I will Slack everything out to you right now. But what I want you to do is once you have this code working, where you can click the Google button and it should log in with Google, see if you can make the user's photo and their email and their username, display name, appear right here.
And their address.
No, I don't think it gives you their address. That's creepy. Cool. Any questions before we do that? Okay, great.
Oh,
Yes, question.
is this